Minatzchim meeting. I think in a week from now, it's the Yud Shvat, but I kind of Parshas Boyesh last year is when we got together as a group, and we're trying to be Minatzchim already for a year, and we still don't have the Nitzachim, so I guess we have to do one more push. We have to gather our strength from a very deep place. And this year is Basi Legani. That's the Indian from Oidin Soif Mata Adin Tachlis. That's the theme. I didn't learn it well yet. I just glanced a little bit at the sif of and scanned the Rebbe's Maimer on it. But the Indian of Oidin Soif Mata Adin Tachlis is the Rebbe explaining over there that even when the Oidin comes down so low, and it goes into all the levels of Tzimtzumim and Gvulis and so on and so forth, it still exhibits the B'li Gvul. There's still a trace of the B'li Gvul that is seen, the fact that the world is Chayamim v'Kayamim and doesn't get weaker. The world of the Shemayim v'Aretz are just as strong. That couldn't be in an Indian that gets weaker. And I'm just thinking of it that if that's true about the Inyanim that are even Oirin Soif, it's the Oir that the Eibishter is Meir Shaykh La'olamas. When it comes to Nishmas Yisrael, it always says that, I learned this yesterday in a Maimer from the Rebbe Rashab, that when it comes to Nishmas Yisrael, in every darga where there is, in every darga that it is, Yidn are higher than the Olamis. They're infinitely more pneumiistic, atzmiistic. So it comes out that the Indian of B'li Gevul, that we all be'etzim are really B'li Gevul. In that case, that it gives us an understanding that with all of our problems and all limitations and all of our boundaries, we really could do it. We have to realize that we really could do it. That I was expecting us to do it. We will do it. In any case, so I'm glad for everybody that's on here today, Baruch Hashem. And Rabbi Raphael Tennenhaus, I don't know him personally. I guess I'm going to get to know him now. I love him already. He's talking about Mashiach, so that's exciting. Every year we love and extra love those that are tuned in to Mashiach and to living Mashiach. So welcome. Thank you for taking of your time to join us. We're excited. We always like new energy and new insight and new thoughts. With this, I hand it over to you.
Thank you, and thank you to Rabbi Aryeh for inviting me for this afternoon session. I know in California it's morning still. So it's Erev Chavdalet Teves, and we know that the Mittler Rebbe said that Lamaila, they said that thanks to the Alter Rebbe's Mesiras Nefesh, so there will always be Yad Chassidim Al Elyono. So really, here we are, and it's so many years after Chav Zayin Oder Rishon, and it's so many years after Gimel Tammuz, and we're all puzzled. We're all puzzled. At the end of the day, we're all puzzled, and that's the terminology that was used to me yesterday when I had both a rapid test and a PCR test. The lady who administered the test to me is actually a principal in Broward County Public School, very brilliant woman. And she said with this new variant that it has all the medical experts puzzled. That's the word she used. And indeed, Chassidim, we are all puzzled. Hayatochen that we're still in Golus, and it hasn't happened. The Rebbe told us to open up our eyes, and we try to open our eyes, and we're still deep in Golus, as everyone knows. So we'll speak a few inyanim, and I'll connect it, push it to the inyan of Yad Chassidim Al Elyono, and how, as we're getting closer to the Geula, we see b'muchish how Yad Chassidim Al Elyono, not just that it will be like this, La'asid Lavoi, Kipshutai, but literally now also. A few inyanim will connect both with Chavdalet Teves and with Chav Teves, and as well as with Yud Shvat. First of all, it came to my hands last week, a sefer that for Zusha saw it. I hadn't seen it before. From my grade 8 Melamed. My grade 8 Melamed was Rabbi Yankov Zilberman, Olav Sholem. He was talking my best Melamed, and he was a very well-known sofer. A lot of people have his tefillin, and he was a mumche. The Rebbe writes in his Kodesh, he refers to him as a mumche, and the Rebbe asked him back in Tovshin Yudalid to do research on the Alter Rebbe's Ksav. So he came out with a sefer, which he passed away in Tinose. And the sefer, which came out approximately a year ago, I'm not exactly sure what day it was published, but about 5 years ago, I was speaking to his son, the sefer, who regrettably he passed away early on in COVID, 63 years old. And he told me that his father wrote Pirish on the Alter Rebbe's halachas in Hilchas Stam and on Gittin and on the Tzuras Oisius. So I told him, oh my gosh, you got to get this published. He said, they're working on it. So Lepoil, it came out and it's published, and you could get it in any good Jewish bookstore. And I was floored when I looked through the Sefer. A lot of the subjects are beyond my scholarship and beyond my range, but we see mamish at a time where Mizman Lizman there comes the opposition to Inyoni Lubavitch, and whether it's Bor Gabik Bor and the Rebbe Rashab's mikveh, or whether it's Alter Rebbe's Ksav. There was recently some Hisnagdas to it. Rabbi Zilberman writes clearly in his Sefer that Roiv Poskim like the Alter Rebbe's Ksav. And he enumerates this. And B'chlal, his Sefer is filled with lomdus. Usually today, most svarim are, it's someone's malakit. Even the big svarim that come out today, it's mainly that someone is malakit something. His Sefer is filled with chidushim, and he's very humble, but he comes to Maskonis, and in his Sefer, he answers questions that people ask on the Alter Rebbe, including the Chazon Ish and others, and he answers in an edel oif, and he was a very edel man. And it's mamish something that every shliach should have, and every sofer should have, and every Rosh Yeshiva should have, and every Lubavitcher Chassid should have, because it really opens up the door to explain the shit of the Alter Rebbe in these most important inyan. Who doesn't have a mezuzah? Who doesn't have tefillin? Who doesn't use a Sefer Torah? And he's poshed ma'ayin in this inyan, and it took 41 plus years for the Sefer to come out. Generally, the Rebbe's shitta was to put out a Sefer fast, and then if there's tikkunim to put out Madura Basra. But for whatever reason, it took 41 years for the Sefer to come out, and it has the haskamas of Rabbi Moshe Feinstein, and Rabbi Hirschbung writes that just like when the Ksas HaSofer came out, Kesses HaSofer from Reb Shlomo Ganzfried on Safris, that every Sofer had to have the Sefer to be a Sofer. So he says the same is with this Sefer Chiddush Sofer, which also has a Riches beer called Tomer Yankiv on the bottom, full of pilpulim, that Rabbi Hirschman writes that every Sofer today has to have this Sefer. So we see Poshet Inyan of Yad Chasidim Al Yoina, that it's not just something that's wishful thinking, or that it's going to be La'asid Lavoi, that Poshet anybody, and I shared this with one of the well-known Sofrim here in Florida, and he was floored. A non-Lubavitcher who sometimes has questions on the shit of Chabad, and he bought the Sefer. I didn't even have to buy it for him, but he's Poshet floored because of the godless of the Alter Rebbe that comes out through the Sefer. So I'm just sharing this because living with Mashiach certainly means living with the Torah Shel Mashiach and living with the Torah of the Rabbeim. And only recently in Tovshin Pei Aleph was this Sefer published. It came out, and I'll give you a little bit of background to Rabbi Zilberman, which is also connected to the Alter Rebbe. Rabbi Zilberman did not come from a Lubavitcher family. In the Sefer, there is a brief history of his family. And I heard when I was a child that Rabbi Zilberman in London, his father was the one who put out the Zilberman Chumash. So those who know the Zilberman Chumash Rashi, that was his father. And he was a Moiches Sfarim, besides being a Sofer and besides being a Melamed. And he also worked on Gittin in the Vadir in Montreal for 45 years. And in the Haskamis, which includes Rabbi Vosner and Rabbi Auerbach and many others, a lot of them knew him from London and from before the war. So they write that once in Antwerp, they didn't know about a certain name, how to write it. So they called up Rabbi Zilberman in Montreal. He was such a bucky when it came to these dinim. He was Pashad a sofer that his name was known throughout the whole world, and he was a mumche. But I was told that during the war in London, he took something out from Seamus. He didn't know what it was because the Shabbat was missing, and he started to learn, and he said, whatever this is, I want to be connected to this. This is what he said. This is the story I heard when I was a young boy about Rabbi Zilberman. We lived around the corner from him, and my father and him were very good friends. And Lepoil, the Sefer, was a Tanya. And that's how he became connected to Lubavitch. The children write a Hagdama to the Sefer that every day he learned Tanya and Likutei Torah before he davened. And his family didn't go with the program. His wife stayed as Skver Chosid, and the children are by and large Skver Chasidim. Some of them are Rabbanim and Skver, but he was a Yid who knew Chassidus, he knew Chabad Chassidus, he was Mekusher to the Rebbe, and by Yuchvat HaGodl, which I had the schus to be there, and I had Yechidus for my Bar Mitzvah by Yuchvat HaGodl. So at that tremendous occasion, which was the biggest crowd in 770 until Yud Aleph Nisan Shnas HaShivim, when the Rebbe turned 70, Lamed Beis. But I was told by Rabbi Zilberman that the Rebbe wanted 7 Sofrim to be present, and he was one of the Sofrim that the Rebbe wanted to be present by the completion of Mashiach Sefer Torah, which was on Teshvat, Erev Yud Shvat Tavshin Lamed. And if you look at the famous pictures of the Rebbe putting the crown on the Sefer Torah, so Rabbi Zilberman is clearly noticeable in 2 of the pictures. So this is something which, as we get close to Mashiach, we see clearly how the Torah, not only of the Alter Rebbe, but he includes in his Sefer many Hairos from the Rebbe in Safrus, probably that the Rebbe gave him. Some of the times when he quotes the Rebbe doesn't even say where. So it's possible that he had instructions from the Rebbe in certain inyanim in Safrus, what the Minik Chabad was. But we see that as we get closer to the times of Mashiach, that the Torah of the Rabbeim is becoming more mefursim and more accessible. And this is taka the inyan of living with Mashiach, because the whole inyan of Mashiach is Gilui Elokus, and Elokus is one thing with Torah, the Eibishter and the Chochmah is one thing. So we were zeicher that even though we're still deep in Golus, that we have this Gilui Elokus and Gilui of the Torah of the Alter Rebbe and the Torah of the Rebbeim. There's a lot of biurim of the Tzemach Tzedek in the Sefer that is explained by Rabbi Zilberman. And again, this is something which everyone should buy, and not only buy, but give to the Rabbanim in your city. It's very, very kedai that the Rabbanim in your town should get the Sefer. You could get it online, Chidush Sofrim. You could Google it. Every bookstore has it. $20. Give it to the Sofrim and the Rabbanim in your town, and this will be poil a big inyan. Similar to this inyan of this Sefer, I'm sure you're all familiar with the Sefer, the Pardes HaMelech that came out. Now we're coming from Chof Teves, that a friend of mine, Reb Meir Elituv, put out. He lives in Beit Ha'Elit. Some of you are aware of the Sefer, which now they're starting to publish it in English. And as he was working on the Sefer of the Rebbe's Biurim on the Rambam, which the Rebbe says, at Gelep mit Mashiach, because we see that he's the only codifier that has all the halachas of Mashiach in the Chibur of the Mishnah Torah. So Rabbi Elituv put out a 7-volume set. In English, it will be 14 volumes of the Rebbe's Biurim on the Rambam, which he calls Pardes HaMelech, and he puts it in the format of the regular Mishnah Torah. You have the Mishnah Torah, and you have the Noisei Kelim, and you have Pardes HaMelech with all the Mekeres Hayad from the Sefer Ma'amakremus of the Rambam that the Kollel put out, and on the bottom you have Mekeres HaPardes, where he took it from the Rebbe's Sichis, from the Rebbe's Igros Kodesh, from the Rebbe's Rishimis, etc. So this Sefer I gave to a lot of Rabbanim in town. I saw that Rabbi Raskin, Mendel Raskin in Montreal, bought it for 40 people in Montreal. And I gave it to the young Israel rabbi in Hollywood. He's retired now, but he lives part of the time in Eretz Yisrael. He told me he didn't have a Rambam in Eretz Yisrael. And Rabbi Eliatuv met him in Eretz Yisrael, and he said, that's my Rambam. The Rebbe's Rambam is the only Rambam I have, and he spends 4 months a year in Eretz Yisrael, and that's what he's learning. So here we have another Gilui of the Torah of Mashiach, the Torah of the Rebbe. In Padas HaMelech, there's Biurim from the Rebbe in Mishnah Torah, not only in Nigla, but also Chassidus. And there's Pashat and Eis Rotz, and there might be some people still who are old-fashioned, and they're shy to pick up a Likutei Sichos. But there's no one who's going to be shy to pick up a Padas HaMelech, a Mishnah Torah, and Pashat learn Torah Shel Mashiach, and the Torah of the Rebbe. So this is also another Gilui of Yad Chassidim al Elyoina, that even though in Golitz we sometimes didn't see it, it was actually Chavdalet Teves that I was on the tank that was attacked by the Satmars. It was a Friday, Chavdalet Teves Lamed Zayin. I was zeichet to be one of the guys that Rabbi Marlow told us on Shabbos to bench Goimel. But I survived. But you often ask, where do you see Yad Chassidim al Elyoina? And at the end of the day, we're seeing more and more that Poshut people are realizing the Torah of the Rebbe, and sometimes the format has to be in a Oifen HaMiskabel, similar to this Sefer Chiddush Sofrim that I'm talking about, and similar to the Sefer Padas HaMelech. So this is two inyonim which just came out recently, and everyone as shluchim and as chassidim should certainly share with whoever you can these incredible biurim on the Torah of the Alter Rebbe and on the Torah of the Rambam, and of course biurim from the Rebbe, both on the Alter Rebbe and on the Tzemach Tzedek and on the Rebbe Sichos in the Rambam. I'm just going to conclude with two inyonim. Number one, that it's a gleiche Zach that we should see that the Sichos of Nun Aleph and Nun Beis are taught in a format to children. I don't know if this is being done. Maybe it's done. I'm not up to date with what's being done, everything for children. But children are pure, and they don't have any political agenda. They don't have any, by them, when they say Baruch Ata, they're speaking straight to Atzmus. They're not speaking to any level of Giluyim, to Atzilus, or to other levels of Sfiras Elyonis. By a child, he's straight with Atzmus. So I did this for a few weeks with my Einiklach, that I gave them the weekly shir of the Sichos of Nun Aleph and Nun Beis, and we did a Zoom when Zoom was very heavy and there was very little interaction face to face. So I did this with my Einiklach, but I'm not the best shir giver for children, and maybe those who are oisik in these inyanim. If it's not being done, I'm suggesting that such a shir should be given, the shiurim of the Sichos Nun Aleph Nun Beis, dafke to children, because children take things as they are, without any pshetlech and without any questions, but they take it straight, and it's meant for children. And this is one suggestion that I have to walk away with this shir. And then, in conclusion, I just wanted to say, Rabbi Wolf mentioned about learning, that he learned something from the Rebbe Rashab recently. If you learn the Torah of the Rebbe Rashab, and we've had Baruch Hashem in our shul every day a shir in Rebbe Rashab's forum in the last 11 years. We've had such a shir, and we still have it. And we see that there's a lot of discussion about what will be la'asid lavai, and the way the Rebbe Rashab describes things. As the Rambam Chassidus, he talks about it as if you're there. The way he describes how things will be la'asid lavai when Mashiach comes, he feel that you're there when he describes it. He's so descriptive. But one of the inyanim that the Rebbe Rashab kochs sich in is the inyan of Simcha. The whole inyan of Simcha Peretz Geder, and the way it's found in Samach to Samach, and it's found in Ayin Beis. So this inyan is very negeya in our behavior with fellow shluchim and b'chlal people at large, because sometimes it's possible that we don't tolerate another chassid or another shliach. At the end of the day, we all have a Yetzer Hara, and at the end of the day, we all are not beinanim. it could be that for whatever reason, some of us don't tolerate someone else. It's possible. So in the Chassidus of the Rebbe Rashab, in a few places, he speaks how you could be soivel other people. And he says that at the time of a simcha, he says all the inyonim that could happen at the time of a simcha, which could, al pashas, it means like you're making a chasna, but in general, it could mean any time that you're besimcha, so certain hagbolas fall apart. And that's really the meaning of simcha peretz geder. So he includes that people who you don't usually tolerate, this is what he writes, that there's a notion that you can't be soivel them. So we all have, perhaps, at least I'm speaking for myself, I don't have patience for certain people, or I don't tolerate certain people. So in the Rebbe Rashab's Chassidus, you find a lot of descriptions of when there is an exception to where you could tolerate everyone. And he writes that Pshas HaSimcha, so people who you normally can't tolerate, you could tolerate. And he also writes that during a simcha, that in Yonim, in Torah, that you don't understand, so during a simcha, you could push it, go to Amkis Hoinyonim, you could go to the depths of Torah study that you can't usually get to, which really, this is the really deeper meaning of Simcha Peretz Geder. It's not just a euphemism, it's not just a cliche, but it really, practically speaking, it means that people that you can't tolerate, you can tolerate, your understanding of Torah gets to a better level. So I have nephews and great nephews who are Litvish, who live in Lakewood. And one of them was recently making a simcha. I went to the chasna. Before I went to the chasna, he told me by the ofruf he doesn't know what got over him. He had the Shabbos of the ofruf, 150 people in his house. And he had like 200 people Shabbos by day in his house. He says he doesn't know what got over him. So I told him, what do you mean what got over you? It's Simcha Peretz Geder. It's the first time he made a chasna. I said, Simcha Peretz Geder. So I sent him samach to samach in the mail. The guy was going nuts. He keeps on quoting to me in Yonim from the Rebbe Rashab, and I sent him some clips and some pictures of Ayin Bays of Yonim, which I just spoke about. And he partially went out of the Kalim. He told me he gives a shir in Gemara Rashi Tosfos. He teaches grade 10 Gemara. He used to teach for many years in Rabbi Fegelstock's yeshiva in Borough Park, and he gave that up a year and a half ago. Now he teaches in Lakewood. And he told me, I don't know what was going on. He says, my shiurim were better. He says, I didn't understand. Why are my shiurim better? I'm making a chasna, and my shiurim are better. And he says, now what you explained to me, I understand why my shiurim are better, because Simcha is Peretz Geder. So with this, I conclude that we should all be the Yom Hilula of the Alter Rebbe. Yom Hilula is the union of Simcha. So we should all be Peretz from all our Gedorim, and our Avos Yisrael should be for every single Shliach, and for every single Chassid, and for every single Yid, and not just theoretically, but practically. And we should take a Zoiche, to be Zoiche, that from all the Koch in Mashiach, and living with Mashiach, Lahaving Maisa Mashiach, that it shouldn't just be something that we're talking about La'asid Lavai, but it should be now, practically speaking, L'mata Masar Tvachim V'hu Yigalenu. I'm done.
Amazing. We're not done until Mashiach is here. But once you joined us, that's it. You joined us, you're here. This is a weekly, we meet together, we brainstorm, we come up with all kinds of ideas and inspiration. Yashikoyach Gadol, Yad Chassidim Al Hayoim is so palpable these days. You mamash see it. You see, like people who were so like people were. I'll give you an example. Rabbi Kotlarski announced 120 mikvahs. Right? There's two states in the United States that don't have, the only two states that don't have a mikveh yet, and that is Wyoming and Idaho. And I think Wyoming and Idaho. And now they're working on building those two mikvahs. And I heard from my sister, she lives in Muncie, she's not, Herzog and not Lubavitch. She's gang-ho, Mashiach and everything, but she's working to create one of the people who passed away in Iran. Her friend's daughter was one of the Bachrim who passed away in Iran. And they decided someone had that maybe, they kept on suggesting certain things they can do for this Bachrim. So finally, someone came up, maybe we'll do a mikveh. And all the things that my sister and others suggested to the mother was not clicking. But when she heard the mikveh, she got very excited because she feels that her son didn't have a chance to produce doitis. So by her making a mikveh, Le'ili Nishmas, her son, it's like she's giving a continuation of doitis, bringing neshamas into this world. So it really registered with her. To me, Agansa Maisa, it turns out that there is an entire campaign full of Balabatim, Lakewood guys, Yeshivish guys, who are now in contact with the Shluch. They're all involved in raising money for the Lubavitcher mikvahs in Wyoming, in Jackson Hole, Wyoming, and in this. There is such a appreciation for Lubavitch that's beginning to happen in the world that it's like we unheard of. And not only on the level of the Pa'ulis of the Rebbe, Pa'ulis of Lubavitch, but people are beginning to open up to the Rebbe's Go'inus and to the Rebbe's teachings and Chassidus in general.
So I just let me just say that I encourage everyone to give and invest in the Pardes HaMelech, Pasha, to give it to Rosh Yeshivas. This Rabbi Elituv is very close with Rabbi Povarsky from Ponevezh, who's a Yedid. He's 90 years old, and the Rebbe in Teves wrote a letter that he had a difficulty with the Rambam, with the mocker of the Rambam that Eved, who's not makabel the Sheva Mitzvahs b'nei Noach, is chayiv misa. And the Rebbe asked, I believe it was the Rogachover, what's the mocker? The Rebbe asked what the mocker, he can't find, and the Rebbe writes that every time I get to this Rambam, the Rebbe was 27 years old. The Rebbe says, every time I get to this Rambam, I'm troubled. I don't know where the mocker is in the Rambam. And I don't know if the Rebbe addressed it later. I don't think the Rebbe ever addressed this later. Maybe he did, but not to my knowledge. But when Rabbi Elituv went to give this Mishnah Torah to Rabbi Povarsky, and he was very excited to receive it. So he asked him, "Do you mind if I ask you a question on the Rambam?" So he said, "No, go ahead." And he told me, this is what Elituv told me. He says, this Povarsky is Taka Yidei Kol HaTorah Kula. The guy is not just a Rosh Yeshiva who knows the Yeshiva Shemesechtes. He knows Gantz Shas. He says, he knows all the Madrashim. He says, the guy Taka is a Oisnam in his Yediyas and Torah. So, and he learns Lakutei Sichos. So he said, and he asked him this question that the Rebbe had asked back in Teves. So he walks over, 90-year-old man, he walks to the bookshelf, straight to a book, straight to a sefer. He pulls out a sefer from Reb Velvel Brisker, and this question, the same question is asked. But the style and the format of how Reb Velvel Brisker asked on the Rambam and the Edelkeit, how the Rebbe asked on the Rambam, you could see the difference between a chassid and someone who was not a chassid, pushed in the manner that they questioned the Rambam. But this sefer was written 6 years after Teves. So this was the Rebbe when he wrote this question to, I believe, the Rogachover. So this sefer from Reb Velvel Brisker wasn't published. So he also doesn't have an answer to it. And Povarsky also didn't have an answer to this question. But it's just of extreme interest to see that we get the Rebbe's Nigla and the Rebbe's Chassidus to the world, and now there are vehicles to more than ever to get the Torah of the Rebbe to as many Yidden as possible.
All right, anybody? This is a Fabrengen. Let's Hashmieni as Kolich.
This past week, thank you, Rabbi Tennenhaus, for your words. This past week, I always looked up to Rabbi Tennenhaus as someone that was left with Mashiach from the behind the scenes. I was a secret fan of Rabbi Tennenhaus, always someone that always left with Mashiach. It's a good example for them as Shliach was left with Mashiach. So thank you for coming on. I hope you continue to join us. We're building a mikveh at Camarillo, and we're dealing with Mikveh USA, Borough Park organization, and they had a certain amount that they were going to give to the mikveh. This last week, they said that there's a Lubavitch guy that likes to donate special dedication of a name of a mikveh every year. And they put me on a Zoom with this guy. He was from the 5 towns somewhere. And as soon as we finished speaking, I get an email later that day says, yeah, it was between us and some other mikveh. And after talking, completely not, Chabad or anything, like they decided we're going to go with you. We want to donate your mikveh, the name of the mikveh. Last week, especially on last Monday morning, the Zoom with this guy. No relation to Chabad, but it was just like a passionate, very excited. The big bracha. He's saying the idea of non-Chabad recognizing Chabad, it was just very clear. So doubled the amount that was going to be given became double because of that. Did he do it via the Uzda last week? Share that.
I'm going to sign off. Everyone should be matzliach.